Hello and welcome to Parenting Unfiltered, a Parents Lead podcast. We bring expert guidance and simple real-life tools to help you support your child's behavioral health. I'm your host, Sarah Kapp, and joining us today is Nikki Mundall, a licensed clinical social worker and co-owner of Comfy Couch Counseling. She works with children and teens in an outpatient mental health setting, utilizing a variety of cognitive behavioral and play therapy techniques. We'll talk about feelings, sibling dynamics, and simple scripts parents can use when emotions run high, especially around the holidays. Nikki, you supported kids and families across all settings, from your private practice to your home. What keeps you focused on helping kids with big feelings?
I appreciate that kids are super resilient and that I get the chance to help them develop those emotional literacy skills to prepare them to be healthy adults that are able to manage their mental health really well. And so we know that early childhood, early elementary school age are really those developmental milestones where we can really shape and mold long-term behavior patterns. So I appreciate getting to work with kids and help them develop those healthy skills.
And what's one way that you kind of do that as a young, maybe 2-3-year-old or versus like a 7 or 8-year-old? How does that look a little bit different between?
Sure. So in kind of those toddler years, 2-3-year-olds, we really focus on that body awareness. So it looks like saying things such as, oh, I notice your muscles are getting really tight. I wonder if you're mad. Almost like you're playing like a game of charades or something like that. And really starting to name for them a little bit what those feelings might be because they don't necessarily have that emotional vocabulary yet. Versus those 7-8-year-olds is maybe asking more questions such as, I wonder what you might be feeling right now. Or I noticed your body doing this. What do you think that means?
Do they usually have a good grasp at that young of age between 2 and 3 or 7 and 8 of what those emotions are? Or does it kind of take a lot of working and practice as they are developing?
I think it kind of depends. So in those early years, we might focus on those basic emotions such as happy, mad, sad, scared. And then as they get older, we turn to more of those complex feelings such as disappointed, embarrassed, confused, things like that.
Sure. I think even at a 7 and 8-year level, sometimes they're still trying to understand what those emotions might be and helping them walk through to even at 7 and 8, correct?
Yeah.
And for parents with young kids, what does emotional health look like? We talk about emotional health all the time, but I think everyone has a different understanding of that. What does that look like in our everyday moments at home versus your clinic?
So everyday moments for emotional health might look like making sure we have a healthy sleep routine, that our nutrition is pretty good. And I know kids are picky eaters for a lot of the time, but making sure that they're eating a variety of foods, that they're not getting too much sugar, things like that. We also look at screen time and we look at their moods in general. We want them to show feelings. We want them to have problems that they learn how to work through. So it's not that if a kid is having a lot of big feelings, that means their mental health is not good. That's actually probably a good sign. It's just that now they need the tools to help them work through it.
And when a preschooler's emotions get the best of them, what is one simple thing that you can do as a parent in the moment to try to get that preschooler or young child to calm down?
So we can usually start with helping them to notice what they're feeling or naming a feeling for them. I wonder if you're bored because of this, or I wonder if you're sad because of this. And they can usually say like yes or no, depending on their emotional vocabulary or their point in development. But if they're not at a point where they can like name the feeling yet, we might just kind of help them redirect. So offer them a hug if they look like they need a hug, or hey, do you need a tissue or something like that? And then say, hey, why don't you come with me and we'll go look at this, or we'll go have a snack or something like that.
Is there ever a time where you have to come back maybe more than once? Like you said, you might have to grab a tissue and come back, but even after the second or third time, as a mom myself, I know that always doesn't work. It's sitting there and being patient with them. And is there any other advice you have is there like a certain number of times you have to go back, or you just kind of like let it go? Or what is your advice for those that may not just be able to get it on the first or second try?
Sure. So sometimes it depends on where you're at and what you're doing. But if you have the time, usually we think a phrase like connection before correction. And so we might need to just actually take sometimes 20 minutes to really connect with that child before they're ready to transition out of that state of mind. And so connection might just look like being quiet and saying, you know what, I'll just sit with you here until you're ready. Or, yep, I know this is really hard. We have time. And just waiting it out a little bit. And you can kind of gauge the child and see if they're ready for you to offer, an intervention or something such as, hey, do you want to color while we wait? Other kiddos are just like, nope, I just want to sit here, but I want you to sit with me. And we can offer that too.
Is it best to leave them in their environment that they're in when they do have big emotions, or is it best to kind of remove them, take them away into maybe a quieter room, or what would be best?
Depends on where you're at, I think. So if you are at home or if you're in kind of a smaller setting where it's not distracting or it's not becoming aggressive or anything like that, then I think it's okay to sit there and wait it out. But, if we're in kind of a large setting or sensory-wise is very overstimulating, we might want to remove them to a quieter space with less people and less noise.
Sure. Do you find it oftentimes if they're in a large setting, maybe with like their friends that they're really close to and there's conflict of some sort and emotions get in the way, that it's best to remove them from their friends, or does it not matter?
Yes and no. I think if they are escalating, where maybe they're like yelling, crying, becoming aggressive, maybe some object aggression, or they're stomping, or even just getting too excited. Sometimes kiddos just get really excited, but then they're getting kind of hyperactive and they're doing really silly, crazy things. Then we might have to say, hey, why don't you come with me? I need to go get something out of the car. Or I wonder if we should have a snack. It's been a while since we've had something to eat. And then you can kind of gently move them to a different area.
Redirect a little bit. Perfect. Parents oftentimes worry that they'll reward their kids by paying attention to them or redirecting any behaviors when they have them. What do you think is a good way to validate their feelings, but yet also pay attention to their needs?
So I always tell parents, feelings are not the enemy, that we can give feelings as much attention as possible, and that would be okay. It's more so the behavior that we don't want to necessarily give too much or too little attention to. And so kind of like when kiddos are whining or just doing kind of annoying things like this, and they know that it's getting on your nerves, it's really trying to ignore those, but more so putting your attention on the emotion. So I wonder if you're bored right now, or I wonder if you're really upset, or things like that, that we can give. Like feelings the stage is what I tell kids a lot in therapy. It is okay for feelings to have the stage. They want the stage for a little bit of time, or else they keep trying to come up because we didn't give them attention. So I say, go ahead and give feelings attention. Just don't necessarily give some of those negative attention-seeking behaviors the attention.
Sure. And if they keep showing those negative behaviors, do you continue to respond or just continue to ignore?
I think it depends a little bit on what it is. Some of it I would say just ignore. Some of just the little things that aren't hurting anybody or aren't really disruptive to anything. They're more so maybe just annoying to the adult or somebody else in the room. But if they're escalating, we might have to intervene at some point if it's becoming a safety concern or if it's becoming really disruptive. Then we might have to say, hey, that emotion is okay, but that behavior is not. And then redirect it in that way.
And I think as a parent when they have two siblings in the house, a lot of times that is that. Like I'll be guilty and I'll say that, yeah, that's annoying to me, but is it really harming each other? Or is there conflict? Is it healthy? I know that siblings have that conflict or the annoying things that they do back and forth that are probably annoying to me, but they're still healthy for them to grow and learn their emotions. So I think every parent is always looking for tips and what they can do within their home to make it easier for their kids, easier for them. What is your easiest thing that you can do and tell parents about as a toolkit that they can do every single week to support their child's emotions?
So something I start with a lot, even in my private practice, is teaching kids kind of the difference between thoughts and feelings. And so kids like to jump right to feelings. And oftentimes that's what we see first is that behavior that goes with that feeling. But we really want to teach that thoughts are separate from feelings. And so there's a little game that I play in my office, or you can play with your kids at home, and you can take like painter's tape or a piece of paper and you make a T for thoughts, an F for feelings, and an A for actions. And then you give hypotheticals like sad, and then they have to jump to which one it is, or something like I like pizza. And then that would be a thought. So they jump to the T. And it's helping them separate that, hey, just because I think it doesn't mean I have to act on it. Or just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. I can change that thought, which is going to then change the feeling, which is then going to change that behavior.
Sure. Do you have any visual props that are your go-to that parents can use effectively within their home? And what might that look like, depending on the age even?
Sure. Yeah, I think visuals are great. So feelings charts or calm down boards, things like that are really important, especially for littles, because again, they don't necessarily have the vocabulary, but they can recognize a face on a picture and say like, oh, I feel like that. And they'll point to it. Even though older kids, they can use that same feelings chart, because sometimes when we're really dysregulated, kind of that prefrontal cortex goes offline. And so we're not using logic and reasoning to help us solve problems. That kind of limbic bottom brain kind of takes over, and we're just kind of acting on emotion. And so they don't necessarily have the skills in those heightened states of emotion to access the words of how they're feeling. So a visual is a great tool. Or if you have a visual of calming strategies, they might not be able to tell you, hey, I need a drink. But if they see a list of things, they don't have to think too hard because they're seeing it, and they say, oh yeah, I need a drink and I need a break or something like that. And so parents can go online, to various websites or to the Parents Lead website to access different PDFs or things that they could print off for free that offer some of those visual charts for emotions, for calming strategies, for sensory regulation, even some yoga-based strategies are really good things to use.
And do you have, I know we talk about a lot of things like in the home, but I feel like a lot of times when we're out of the home, kids have big emotions too. You're at the store and things happen. Can you use some of those same maybe not visuals, but do you have any simple tools that parents can utilize when they're at the store, at the grocery store, and their child has big emotions? What does that look like for a parent?
Yeah, so really those deep breathing strategies we can use anywhere. And sometimes if you say take a deep breath, kids kind of just roll their eyes, especially those 7, 8, 9-year-olds. But if we make it kind of fun, you make a game out of it a little bit, you can do that easily at a store. Or if you bring kind of some sensory tools with you. So I always tell families, carry Lifesavers or Jolly Ranchers. Things like that are a really good reset for kind of your vagus nerve to help you relax a little bit. And they offer distraction because it's an immediate taste in your mouth, and kids focus on that. Or a sucker or something like that would be a good thing for parents to do in the community.
And what would you have to say about, I feel like I mentioned it earlier, that every home, if there's a sibling, there's always conflict. And that can be a practice field for empathy. But how as parents can we coach to have a healthy boundary, healthy relationships with our siblings without overreacting?
Yeah, so I have 3 kiddos, so lots of conflicts all the time. And I think as parents, sometimes we just have to help kids slow it down. So kids often go from 0 to 100 really fast, and siblings are no different. And so if we want siblings to work together to figure it out, we might just have to help them slow it down. So it's helping them to pause and saying I wonder how we could have handled that differently. Or, oh, how about everybody take a seat? And then we're going to take the talking stick, or we're going to pass this thing around. And then each of you take a chance to share what you think happened, just to help them slow it down a little bit.
And is it healthy sometimes to just let them go? I'm a mom of 2 girls, so I get it. Like you said, you have conflict within your home too. And sometimes I just like to let them argue it out. And does that help them with any skill building, or should we just let them go before we intervene?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay, again, as long as it's not turning into a safety concern or anything like that, or name calling or threats or those kinds of things. But if you can tell that they're working through it, then absolutely, you can just let them go and see where it goes. And you can kind of help shift, a little bit here and there as you might need to. But kids are actually really resourceful if we just give them the time to figure it out. And it may not be exactly how we would have done it, but it doesn't mean that the way they did it was wrong.
As we transition into the holidays and families get busy, what might it look like for you to be able to talk to your child about the non-normalcy of their routines?
Sure. So I always say, before you go anywhere, before you start a busy day, make sure you've met basic needs. Do you have enough to drink? Have we had food? Did we get enough sleep? And checking, are we sick? All of those things play a factor in how that child is going to do on a day that's not their typical routine. And then it's really prepping that kiddo ahead of time. Hey, here's what we have planned today. And if you notice, morning of, hey, Johnny has the sniffles and just doesn't quite seem himself, he's probably going to definitely need a nap today. That might shift your plans a little bit. And as the parent, being okay with those plans changing. And so it's not just the kiddos that sometimes have a hard time with changes. Sometimes us as parents who are no, I have these 17 things that I need to get done today and you're coming with. And sometimes we just can't. And we have to recognize that kids are individuals too, who might not be able to sustain that day. But if we've met those basic needs and we've prepped them on the plan, they should be okay to make it through that day.
And what happens when you're at a gathering and you notice, things are slowly going downhill, they're unraveling a little bit? Is there a simple thing that they can do to kind of reset? I know we talked a little bit earlier about resetting within the home, but if you're out, at a public party or something like that, what might that look like for the parent and the child?
So at a public place, that might look more like pulling them aside. and getting out of kind of that spotlight of the group or the family or whatever situation that you're in. And so again, it might be redirecting to, hey, let's go get a drink, let's go get a snack, or let's step outside for a minute. Or, hey, can you help me get something out of the car? And just taking them on a short walk to kind of calm their sensory system a little bit, because family gatherings or public events with like Santa or things like that are kind of chaotic and really overwhelming for kids. Even though the overwhelm might be excitement, for some kids it's also overwhelm as in scared, because they don't know the characters or the people. And so it's a lot of emotions to juggle.
Sure. What are behaviors that look defiant but might really just be dysregulation? So they're not trying to, they can't understand what's even going on inside their own bodies, and it's just coming through as dysregulation. But as a outsider looking in, they're thinking, oh gosh, they're not listening to whoever it might be that's giving them instructions. So what might that look like, and how should we respond differently?
Yeah, so dysregulation often looks like yelling, crying, stomping. It can also look though like defiance. So like, no, I'm not going. I don't want to. You can't make me. Things like that. And so really what that child usually is telling you is, I don't know what to do right now, or I can't handle this right now, because most kids are pleasers. They want to please the adults that they're with or their teacher or whoever it might be. And so when you get kind of that pushback, it usually means that something's happening internally, that they're having a really hard time dysregulating. And so again, it might be slowing it down for them. I wonder what's happening right now. Or it looks like you're having a really hard time with this. Can you tell me why? And see what they have to say. And if they're like, no, I can't, then you just sit with them and you're like, okay, well then maybe I'll take a guess. And you tell me, thumbs up, thumbs down, or something like that. And usually they'll kind of start to come around or re-engage. But some other kiddos might just totally need space. Some kids are like, no, I cannot even handle you talking to me right now, but you can sit next to me.
Sure. And what might it look like too for a child that is really having a hard time understanding like their own emotions, even at an older age? I know we talked about as they're 7 or 8, they're starting to understand their feelings, but as an adult, maybe you're trying to talk to them and they just say that no, or they plug their ears and don't want to listen. And any tips for parents that have a child that might just not even understand their own emotions?
Yeah, those kiddos are kind of tricky sometimes when they have those really big feelings and really big reactions to those feelings. And so we might just offer them space. Hey, it looks like you don't want to talk about this right now. I'll come back in 5 minutes and see if you're ready. And for some kids, it might even have to be like 1 minute. Some kids don't like that separation where you go away for too long. Or you can offer, would you like me to just sit with you while you have this big feeling? Or would you like me to offer you some strategies to maybe help that feeling grow smaller?
Sure. What are 3 small routine tweaks that might reduce some of those emotions, especially after school? Parents or kids come home from school and really just sometimes just need a break. They've been in the classroom all day. What are simple things versus turning on the TV or throwing an iPad in front of them that they might be able to do to help set them up for success during the evening hours?
So first thing I like to go to is food. Most kids are starving when they come home from school, and when we're hungry, we get hangry. And so if we can offer them a snack, and most of the time they don't drink enough water during the day. So fueling those basic needs. And sometimes when kids come home, we can't meet them with demands because they've had demands all day long, whether it's demands from their teacher, like, can you do this assignment, or sit down, or go here, go there, or even just social demands of having to be on top of their mood and their interactions with their friends all day long can be really draining for kids. And so when they get home, they might actually just need time, but not screen time, but time to just sit, whether it's read a book, color or draw, do a puzzle, build with Legos or blocks. Some of those are really good calming strategies. And then maybe 20, 30 minutes later, then we can swoop in and say, okay, it's time for us to wash up and get ready for supper or something like that.
Speaking of school, I often hear a lot of times from parents, just recently even, that how they act in school is way different than how they act at home. And I always think I get that same report when we go to talk to our teachers, but and I validate that as us being more of a safe space, that they can show their emotions and stuff. Would you think that that's accurate, or what do you think the big difference is of their behaviors in school versus their behaviors at home?
Sure. So I think at school, and this is really sometimes depending on the age, but there's a lot bigger consequences that come with misbehaving at school, whether you're fearing the principal or you're fearing maybe the social rejection that comes with acting out in class or getting in trouble in front of the class or having detention or something like that. And so kids, there's sometimes a bigger risk to misbehave at school than there is to misbehave at home.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Going back to the screen time, I know a lot of times, guilty myself, but when we're in public and our 4 or 5, 6-year-old is having big emotions in the checkout line and you just need to get through because you guys are all tired. And sometimes they're laying on the floor, kicking and screaming, and we bribe them or, whatever you want to call it, or hand them your tablet. What's a different way that you can redirect that behavior and try to get out of the store with you and your child?
Yeah. So I always tell parents, be careful what you say when you're redirecting a behavior, because sometimes we hear parents say things like, well, if you don't pull it together, we're leaving the store. Well, if you say that, then you really need to do that. And so if you're not willing to do that, then we have to be really careful not to kind of threaten with that. And so it might be like, yeah, this really is boring. I'm sorry this line is taking so long. I'm getting really tired too. And so it's validating in that way, and then offering maybe some kind of a distraction. I wonder what we could do together until it's our turn. Or would you like to hold my credit card and then you can help me swipe it when we get up there? And you just kind of distract them to focus on something other than maybe the candy bar that they wanted or the fact that it's taking forever and they just want to go home.
Sure. I really like when you talked about validating their feelings, because I think a lot of times as an adult, we forget that kids have their own emotions, just like we do as adults. If we're hangry, like you mentioned earlier, we act differently. And so understanding when kids are bored or tired or hungry, those things can come out too, and they're unable to express that. So I really appreciate that you talked about validating their feelings too. So, okay. So lightning round, true or false? If I ignore tantrums, they stop faster.
False. If we're ignoring a feeling, that feeling's not going to go away. And so it's kind of a trick question in a sense, because yes, it's true in the sense we don't want to reward negative attention-seeking behavior. However, we do want to give attention to the emotion. And so we don't want to ignore when a child is having a big feeling.
Teaching feelings is too advanced for toddlers.
False. So toddlers are very good at picking up on body cues or nonverbal body cues to tell emotion. So 2, 3-year-olds can recognize oh, mommy has tears, mommy's sad. Just as much as older kids can recognize oh, mom has a frown on her face or her posture is a little bit different. She must be feeling something big.
Okay, next question. Saying you're okay helps kids calm down.
False. So saying you're okay kind of invalidates how they're feeling. Now, if they fall and, have a tiny, tiny scrape on their knee, or they trip, but they're not injured, we can say, it's okay. You can get up. You've got this. And we can kind of empower them with that statement. However, if they're really, really scared of something, or they had a really bad dream and you're like, oh, you're fine, go back to sleep, that's kind of invalidating. So we don't want to say that.
Okay. And last one, timeout is the only way to set limits.
False. So a lot of the time, we don't even need a timeout. We just need a redirection, or we need to just say, whoa, what happened there? We need to slow it down and then help them make a better choice.
As we move on, do you have what's your favorite as a parent, you said? What is your favorite thing that you take from your practice and take it into your home and use with your children that you could think every parent out there, regardless of the age, could implement within their home to help support their child's emotions?
So I use this metaphor of who's driving your bus. And so sometimes for younger kiddos, I'll have them draw it out, draw a bus and draw themselves in the driver's seat. And then in kind of all those windows, put a different emotion face in each window. And we talk a lot about, okay, if we're regulated, that means that the kiddo is in the driver's seat. And so if I'm driving my bus, my feelings can be passengers on my bus, but they can't control where I go, how I drive, what I do. But let's say anger hops in that driver's seat. Well, then my bus is probably going to go too fast, or I'm going to crash, or I'm going to do something like that. And so whenever I see even my own kiddos kind of dysregulating, I might offer the phrase of who's driving your bus right now? Is it you, or is it sadness? Is it worry? Is it anger? Those kinds of things.
And do you use that within the community too, or is that a visual you use within the home, or are you able to use it across environments?
Yeah, I think it can be used anywhere if you kind of just use that phrase of who's driving your bus, or if there's some other thing that your kid is really into, that you can kind of shift that metaphor to. Anything that offers really that balance of helping them remember who's in control. And we want to make sure that they remind themselves that, hey, I can have this big, scary feeling, but it doesn't have to take over me. I can still be in control and make good choices, even though I'm really, really mad at my sister right now.
We all know what that's like. What's one message that you would want every parent or caregiver to remember the next time that their child is having those big emotions?
I think just that emotions are okay, that emotions are not something we have to fear. And so sometimes I talk a lot with parents about, hey, if you're having kind of this big response to your child's emotions, you might have to check in with yourself a little bit. Why am I getting so upset because my 10-year-old is whistling nonstop, right? Why is that bothering me so much? and then do a little bit of self-reflection, which then helps us to maybe better redirect that child once we kind of meet our own needs too sometimes.
Yeah, I think oftentimes too, we talk about role modeling. Our kids often pick up with what we're doing and we're displaying within the home, within the community. And so good or bad, they pick up on those little actions. So I think it's so important to be able to check your own emotions too. And when you're having a bad day, be able to reiterate that to your kids too. Can you talk a little bit about that too, is your emotions as a parent or caregiver, and maybe you do have a bad day. Maybe you lash out on your child for a reason. What's the best way to go about and kind of reframe or redirect your own emotions?
Yeah, it's always we call it like a corrective emotional experience when we can come back and say to kids, you know what, I'm really sorry. Earlier, I yelled at you a bunch and that was not okay. I was really, really stressed, or I was really angry, and I should have handled that better. Let's talk about what happened, or let's talk about how you felt when that happened. And I think it's okay to say to kids, like, hey, I had a really hard day today. And this might be like outside of a time of like, you just got mad at them. Just in general, we might get home from work and say, you know what? I had a really stressful day today. I might need to take 5 minutes to calm down before I come hang out with you. Can you just hold on 5 minutes? That it's okay for them to witness us as adults have to use coping skills, because we have to use them all the time. And so the more that they see us just using that in everyday life, hopefully the easier they will be able to implement that in their everyday lives as well.
And I, as a parent myself, like I said, I've learned too over the years that don't follow it with a but. I'm sorry, and just do that. But your behavior caused me to act like that. And I was guilty of it for so long. But then once I learned to just take that but away and just apologize for my actions and take responsibility, they then started doing that too. And they had big emotions and maybe were a little bit not excusable, but they got the best of them, and they then come back and say, I'm sorry, this is how I was feeling. And they really, like I said, role model those behaviors. So
yeah. No, it's really easy to follow it with, I only did that because, or I felt that way, all those things. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good reminder not to follow it with a but.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for all the advice that you've given for parents and caregivers on how to handle their child's emotions.
Yes, thanks for having me.